How significant is it that the Culture Secretary has said that the fear of being cancelled is stopping folk from saying what they think?
I think it's very significant, and I think it's about time a government minister made this kind of intervention into the problem of cancel culture. And, we often hear about the big cases of cancel culture, the famous comedian or the famous author who's been torn down because they have incorrect opinions, allegedly. But what we often overlook is the chilling effect that cancel culture has across society. So a poll recently in the UK found that around half of people feel that they can't express their views. In the US, around 62% of people say they can't express their views. And in these instances, we're not talking about views that are particularly outrageous. We're talking about things like believing in biological sex, questioning aspects of the transgender ideology, not feeling entirely comfortable with mass immigration, or being worried about radical Islam, for example. These are legitimate points of view, but they're so demonized by the cancel culture mob that people feel they can't express them. And I think that has a detrimental impact on public debate and public life.
And as I said in my introduction, I think it's even more dangerous than that, because I agree with every word that you've just uttered. It drives them and that line of thought underground. And when it's secretive and in the shadows, I think it's even more dangerous.
Yes, I think when we're talking about actual views that people like you and I would find utterly horrible, like racism, for example, and anti-Semitism. The problem there is that very often those views are driven underground, and that's where they can fester and grow and really gain an influence and a following away from the disinfectant of sunlight, if you like, the ability of the rest of us to call them out, to know what people are saying, to really point the finger at those people and say, listen, this is wrong, you shouldn't be holding these views, and challenging them in the free arena of public debate. But I think that the problem we face today is that lots of very perfectly legitimate points of view are being redefined as racist or Islamophobic or transphobic. We often hear that term phobic to brand certain moral beliefs as unacceptable and beyond the pale. And that's where I have a real problem. I have a real problem with people's genuinely held, perfectly legitimate moral and political beliefs being rebranded as racism or phobia, because that's a recipe for cancelling certain ideas and really limiting the ability of people to have an honest public discussion.
Yeah. I mean, interestingly on that, we've already talked about and reported what Nadine had to say. The number 10 Downing Street let it be known that the Prime Minister, quotes, supports the idea of independent thinking and intellectual freedom. They should be non-negotiable. I mean, that's also quite significant. So you've got Nadine on the one hand, the Prime Minister on the other hand, making very similar points.
It's very significant, and it gives me a bit of hope. And I wish the government would push even further down this line and say, listen, freedom of speech is a central part of British life. But, if you look at one thing that worries me at the moment is the warped priorities of certain sections of the media. So, for example, we have been obsessing over the past few weeks with things that cricketers said or did, as you outlined, 10 or 12 years ago, to the expense of talking about, for example, the fact that there was almost a bombing of presumably a maternal unit at a women's hospital. There was almost an extraordinary act of barbarism. And instead of talking about issues like that, which I think are incredibly serious, we're engaging in this offence archaeology, where we're rummaging around in the past to find things that people said a decade ago when they were very young and to hold them up as despicable people who must be cancelled. We have to get our priorities straight. We've got to stop cancelling people, and we've got to really nurture a free, open public sphere.
But do you think that Azim Rafiq's old posts, which are clearly anti-Semitic, albeit written by a youngster who, as an adult, has now apologised for it, do you not think there's a danger that they invalidate his criticisms of more recent examples of racism towards him and other people in the cricket game?
I think the Azim Rafiq case has really exposed the hypocrisy of the woke mob. So they have been obsessing for the past few days over his testimony about racism that he suffered. And no one would, I hope, would seek to justify the racism that he suffered. It sounds really, really depressing and horrible. But I think what they're now doing is exposing their double standards, because they're not talking in enough detail about the racist views that he expressed. So there is an extraordinary double standard in the Rafik case. And I think he will probably get a bit of a free pass on his comments, which were unquestionably racist, and he has now apologized for them. But the thing is, my view, I want to give people the benefit of the doubt. And one of the problems with cancel culture is that it is so ruthless. It never gives people the benefit of the doubt. It just crushes them and expels them from polite society. I want to give Rafik the benefit of the doubt. He was young when he made those comments. I hope he's changed. I want to give Michael Vaughan the benefit of the doubt for the supposedly racist comments he made, which he categorically denies. Let's allow people to assess themselves and move on, rather than ruthlessly destroying them and saying they can't be in public life anymore.
Final point, and it's a generality I referred to in my lead-in, Brendan, but I want to end on it because I think it's quite important. Should anonymity be banned on social media?
I find this a really difficult discussion because I think anonymous accounts are increasingly problematic, and I get so much abuse. I'm not on Twitter. I avoid Twitter, but I am on Instagram, and I get so much abuse on Instagram from anonymous accounts. So they are deeply unpleasant. But I think there are people out there who still need to be anonymous. Whistleblowers, people in tyrannical regimes like Saudi Arabia or Egypt, they need to be anonymous. And because of cancel culture, some people need to be anonymous simply because they hold certain views. For example, feminists in a particular workplace who don't think that a man can become a woman, they might have an anonymous account because they know they could lose their jobs. So there's a problem because anonymous accounts are used by trolls to really hound people and make their life a misery, but they're also needed by other people who want to express their views, but they can't because of the censorious culture. So it's a difficult issue to straddle, I think.